Welcome to the Voter Interest Project's candidate interviews for 2023. I'm Alan McPheeters, the Executive Director of the Voter Interests Project. Our mission is to provide voters with the information they need to make informed decisions about government, candidates, and ballot measures. Our focus is local. We cover Island County, its cities and towns, and various special districts, as well as the representatives from the 10th Legislative District. The 2023s are local and nonpartisan. We are covering 44 elective offices on this year's ballot, including mayors, city councilors, school board directors, and commissioners for hospital, port, fire, parks, and cemetery districts. 67 candidates filed for these offices during filing week in May, and we have invited all of them to do interviews for you. We also have extensive coverage of these elections and the actions of these government agencies on our website, voterinterests.com. The following interview is with Phil Snider, who is running for position 5 on the Stanwood-Camano School District Board of Directors. We provided a list of potential questions to the candidate in advance of the interview. All right, so here we are with Phil Snider, who is running for the school board position number 5 at the Stanwood-Camano School District. Phil, welcome to the Voter Interest Project.
Thank you so much for doing this, Alan. This is a great service.
Oh, well, we aim to help, so thank you. Where are you? Are you at home today, or?
I am. I'm in my home office here. Actually, this is the only office I have now. When I registered for the position, I was still a college professor, but that ended 5 days ago.
Wow.
So this is the only office I've got these days.
Well, so college professor, where?
Lake Washington Institute of Technology in Kirkland.
Interesting. And what did you teach?
I taught English and an intro to film.
Very good. Oh, well, so running for office is right up your alley.
Well,
let's go through just a handful of biographical things, just so people get to know who you are and where you're coming from. Are you married or single?
Married, 47, almost 48 years.
48 years. That's outstanding.
As a matter of fact, the 3rd of July will mark the anniversary of our first official date.
Wow.
So
outstanding.
Disneyland.
Well, congratulations on 48 years. That's quite a benchmark. My wife and I have been married for 25 years this summer, so we've got a little ways to go to catch up with you. Now, I'm guessing you have children, maybe grandchildren?
4 children, 6 grandchildren.
Yep.
The 3 of them, my daughter lives right here on Camano Island, and she's very involved, and our 2 grandchildren are in the school district, or 2 of our grandchildren are in the school district. I got a son who's an engineer down in Boeing. I've got a son and a daughter-in-law in Port Angeles. He's a web designer and an artist. And then I've got a son living in Mapleton, Utah.
Oh, wow.
4 children, my 4 grandchildren.
Very good.
Yeah.
And so I'm guessing, well, maybe I shouldn't guess. Did you grow up on Camano, or did you move here from somewhere? Or?
I did not. I grew up way down Southern California.
What brought you from there?
Yeah, that was in Riverside, but Riverside only had 49,000 people then. They're literally 10 times bigger than that now.
Wow.
I'm so glad to be out of California. But we have bounced around quite a bit around the country. In New Orleans for a while, in 5 years in Casper, Wyoming. But we've come back to the Puget Sound area 3 separate times. And now that I'm retired, they don't have any pull on me anymore. I'm here to stay.
I see. Very good. Scrolling my notes, it's terrible. So obviously, as a professor, you have you went off to higher education. Where did you go to school, and what did you study while you were there?
Well, before I went to school, I did my first 2 years of college. I dropped out for a while thinking I'll make some money and make this easier. It took me 15 years to get back. So I was in technical sales most of that time.
Okay.
Um, medical products, artificial heart valves, total hips, total knees.
Interesting.
I was a claims adjuster and a private investigator for a while.
Wow.
Came first. When I finally decided what I really wanted to do with my life, at the age of 38 or 9, I
Mhm.
went back to school. I got my bachelor's degree in English from UC Davis in California,
Okay.
and then a master's degree at the University of British Columbia, our neighbors to the north.
Now, how did you end up at UBC?
Well, um, my particular favorite author, the era that I wanted to study, is the transition between Victorian literature and modern literature. And my favorite author is Rudyard Kipling. And there was a particular authority on Kipling up there, who was also a friend of my advisor down at Davis.
Oh,
So
interesting.
got up to UBC.
Very good. So with all of those experiences, I'm guessing you did not serve in the armed forces.
I did not, although with some of the classes I've taught in the last 30 years, I should have got combat pay.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
That's actually more of a question that we I think of importance here on Whidbey with the Naval Air Station than on Camano. But we always have that needs.
My dad, of course, served in World War II. He was
Sure.
naval aviator, flew in the back seat of a dive bomber off the Enterprise.
Ooh, man.
Yeah.
Wow.
And my son served a tour in Kuwait.
Oh, very good. Well, we appreciate that service. Let's wrap up the bio section with, are there community organizations you're involved in, either governmental or community service kind of things?
I've done quite a bit of community service. Of course, 3 sons. I was in the Boy Scouts, from Cub Scouts to Eagle.
Sure.
2 Eagles, not 3, not quite 3. We're just short.
Well, that's pretty impressive too.
I also have taught a self-sufficiency group, teaching people how to be more self-sufficient with their finances. And my wife and I worked as volunteers, facilitating a support group for women whose husbands were addicted to pornography.
Wow.
It's a 12-step group. Really, really important work. I love those sweet ladies so much.
Yeah.
Tell you a thing about what we did, because it's all confidential. It was a
Sure.
wonderful experience.
Ah, well, that sounds like it'd be interesting and sometimes heartrending work.
It was that too.
But what made you decide to throw your hat in the ring for the school board?
Well, I've been in education now. Last March marked 30 years.
Okay.
As a college professor. And my daughter is also an educator. She is a full-time stay-at-home mom, but she has taught online.
Oh,
many years. So we talk about education quite a bit and the needs of the schools. And of course, she has her 2 children, my grandkids, our grandkids. So we talk quite a bit about that. She's been on me for about 5 years saying, when you retire, this is what you have to do. And she finally convinced me. And as soon as I did, she was going to the 5th grade camp with her daughter, and she's very well connected with the school. She does a lot of service at the school. Talked with all those moms and talked about what needs to happen on the board. And she came home and said, okay, if you'll do this, they'll all behind you. So, okay, I'll do it.
very good. So what is this?
Well, serving on the board. It's school boards, as I've studied them, are a really interesting phenomenon. Okay. As a matter of fact, I talked with Dr. Rumbach about this a little bit. And she says, if you get elected, right after I swear you in, as a member of our board, I'm going to say congratulations, boss. We work with the superintendent, okay, and running for the superintendent or running to serve with the superintendent is something that we need to do with the community. But the board, not the individual board members, but the board as a whole,
Exactly.
are the bosses.
Interesting. And I've heard school board members talk about they are the boss and they have one employee, the superintendent. I don't know if that's the way they look at it over at Stanwood-Camano.
Well, I suppose, yeah, we have one employee in terms of we hire, we fire, we train, we supervise. However, we have a constituency.
Yes.
We have two, as a matter of fact. One is the students, to make sure that they're getting the education that they're going to need to be functional and productive in our society. And the other is the parents who appoint us and put their trust in us to see to their children's needs. So yeah, I'm going to have a lot of bosses.
Yes, I suppose that's true. Every time you get involved in something like this, you end up finding just how many people have an interest in what you're doing. That's interesting. Now, one of the things that you'll be responsible for helping to develop is a budget, and the Stanwood-Camano budget is a tricky bit of work these days. But the budget for the last year had expenditures of approximately $112 million between all the different funds. Do you have experience with budgeting, especially
experience with budgeting was somewhat limited. I was at a technical college, but I taught the gen ed courses.
Mm-hmm.
Additionally, at Lake Washington, the tech courses run from 7 a.m. to noon.
Okay.
The gen ed works from noon until the end of the day. Okay. I was on the budget committee for a while, a year or so. Unfortunately, they were always scheduled to meet when I was in class.
Oh.
So, and they couldn't change their schedules because it's what they've done forever.
Yeah.
And there was no other time for me. So I didn't get to stay with the budget committee, but I get to learn this, that it's not about adding up the columns and making sure everything balances. The budget committee's responsibility is weighing priorities, setting priorities.
Yes.
So that we know exactly what gets the primary emphasis. And if our primary emphasis in this school district is not the basic fundamental education of our children so that they can succeed when they go to college or when they go into business or whatever they do, then everything else is extraneous to the agenda.
Right.
That's the primary issue.
Very good.
That's the part of it.
Well, certainly. And if it weren't for teaching the kids, there would be no purpose to the organization as a whole.
Not at all.
Very good. Is there some piece of being on the school board that you're most concerned about or interested in? Is it curriculum or policy or?
Well, I did serve for a long time on policies and procedures committee.
Okay.
So I have drafted and revised and negotiated and applied numerous policies for the school. I have a lot of experience with that. I led the faculty bargaining team 4 times, 4 different contacts, contracts,
right,
which is an agreement on policy.
Sure.
And served as grievance officer for 8 years or so, which has to do with the application plans. So yeah, I think policy is going to be my strong point. But all that misses the point, really, because bringing these perspectives and values, bringing my talents to bear is important to me.
Right.
But I'm an elected, or I will be an elected representative of the people of this district, and bringing their values and their desires into focus is what my real job is. I'm going to represent them.
Very good. So I guess I said in the intro before we got started that we'd sent you a list of questions, and we're kind of working our way through those. But you know what you're talking about really touches on something that we're hearing a lot for school boards generally, not just in Island County, but across the country. One of the current board goals includes implementation on inclusive practices and commitments to equity. What is your sense of what your community thinks about that? And do the goals that they have go too far or not far enough?
I've read the policy. Had I been there to assist in drafting and discussing it, there are some things I would have changed or argued about. On the other hand, as an overall look,
Right.
it's probably a policy I could live with. But the board needs to understand, the public needs to understand that there's a difference between policies and procedures.
Okay.
Policies are partially dictated to us by the legislature, by the government, by the state Office of Public Instruction.
Right.
Okay? But we have some latitude in how we apply it. We write the policies that we want to be followed in the district. I'm speaking as if I were already on the board.
Right.
Directors draft and write an established policy, and then we hand it off to the superintendent and the administrators of the various schools. Okay. And they determine how to apply that policy in their procedures. Now, if I'm the writer of the policy, and then I happen to be the administrator who administers the policy, there's not going to be any disconnect.
Sure.
But it's not legal for me to do that, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to hand that policy to people who are going to apply it. And if we find that there's a disconnect, if we find that the procedures don't match what was intended in the policy or what the board's intention for the policy, then the board has the responsibility to communicate that discrepancy back to the administrators and say, this is not what we're having on. And if necessary, we can amend the policy.
Do you feel like there are good mechanisms in place? Maybe you don't know because you haven't been on the board, but are there good mechanisms in place for board members to know how well those policies in implementation are matching up with the policies as designed?
Again, I don't know because I'm not a member of the board.
That's fair.
But I think there will be.
Okay.
In this district, there's a lot of visitation by board members to the various schools. And these are set up by the superintendent. Excuse me, it's hay fever season. And I have to excuse myself when I say it. My kids are out of town on vacation, and I'm keep feeding the grandkids goats, and they eat grass. I'm not oats. I'm feeding them, and they eat grass hay, and the grass really gets to me, and it may yet.
I can imagine. I had a friend that I worked with for many years. We lived in Eugene, Oregon.
Oh, okay.
And he was basically useless for the entire month of April because of grass. It's terrible.
Eugene is one of the worst places in the whole country for hay fever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, we have visitations that are scheduled around at the various schools. It is not appropriate for board members to come into the school and say, you're not doing this right, fix it.
Right.
As an individual board member, I have no authority. It's only the board as a whole, a quorum of the board, that has any authority. So I would be each of the positions, except position number 5, which I'm running for, has an assignment to specific areas in the district.
Right.
Position 5 is an at-large position. So I would be touching base with all of those areas and getting input from each of the other directors. And then as a board, we would function together. I think there's probably some good mechanisms in place.
That's fair. Another piece of that is, I read over your voter's guide statement, and you said, in part, it is our responsibility to see that we respect the wisdom and authority of parents and keep their trust in educating their children. How's the district doing?
I'm sorry, say it again.
How's the district doing on that front?
I don't see any major problems. I don't think we've got any fires that need to be put out. On the other hand, we see coverage of what's going on in larger districts, in the Seattle area, in Tacoma, in other larger towns, and those are concerning. We want to make sure that we maintain the values of our community, not the values of some other community.
Yes. Tricky to do in these times. I have a sense, and I don't know how much time you spent looking at, say, school board agendas and things like that. It's kind of an occupational hazard for me, because there are 4 school districts in Island County, most of which meet twice a month. And in looking at the agendas, what I see is an enormous amount of time that school boards spend reviewing policy changes that come from the Washington State School Directors Association. That seems to be the body that sort of holds the prototypes for policies, and they go out to the districts. And you might not have much insight yet on this, but I'm just wondering, as far as I can tell, a lot of those just get rubber stamped through. Now you have a particular expertise in dealing with policy and procedures. Was there an organization that sort of sent you policy changes and then your committee would talk about them, or were they entirely internally generated?
At the college, they were generally internally generated, and we dealt with them on site. In public education, K-12, the laws are set by the legislature and the governor. Model policies are then developed by the State Office of Public Instruction.
Right.
And then they send out these model policies and ask us to adopt or adapt, is my understanding. Okay, that's what the trainers told me. Which gives us latitude if we've got the motivation or the gumption to do it, to adapt those to meet our needs here. It also means that you got to know a little bit about the tricky process that is writing policy. I told you there's a couple things I might have changed. There's one phrase in the current policy that I would have changed with just one word to make a difference. And I can't quote it to you, but it's one of the sections that's talking about equity as opposed to equality. And it says, equity is not equality. And I would have said, equity is not necessarily equality. Sometimes equal is just fine. Well, I'll give you an example. Okay.
Okay.
We have an office, or we had 5 days ago, an Office of Disability Support Services at the college forever. Okay. We had students with disabilities, with documentable disabilities. They would, I would send them to the Office of Disability Support Services. They would evaluate, and then bring back a plan. Frequently, that plan would include time and a half for completing assignments. And in a writing class, that's tough, because I can't really give them the assignment until I've covered the writing techniques and principles and skills that I want them to practice. So I can't give them the assignment early.
Right.
And if I give it to them late and let them have time and a half, we're going to be half of a section into the next step before they ever start on it.
Right.
And we talked about this a lot. And I finally said, okay, look, I'm going to give everybody in the class this long time that they need so that these people can accomplish this. I had to fight a long time on that one because that wasn't the plan for meeting this person's needs. And I said, is this person getting time and a half? Yes, she's getting time and a half. He's getting time and a half to do it. The fact that somebody else is getting time and a half as well is irrelevant to this person's needs.
Yes.
Equity is not necessarily equality, but sometimes equality is the only way to make sure that equity occurs.
It does make sense to do these things more on a case-by-case basis. It's like I follow someone who talks about healthcare, and we're always talking about tailoring treatment programs to the specific person that they're dealing with. I imagine it's very similar. Interesting. Keeping my eye on the time. Oh, we got to talk about this. So Stanwood-Camano is not alone in any way with regard to reduced education plans. They're going through this in all three of the other districts in the county and of course other places across the state. Why do you think that the revenues are falling short? And what do you think about the way that the district has decided to address that?
Okay, well, one of the reasons, there's a number of reasons why the budget's falling short. Okay, one of them is that the well's gone dry as far as state and federal COVID funding.
Right.
But that was mistaken procedure, not policy, but procedure, because you never should be treating temporary funding as if it were going to be permanent. And when we become dependent on a temporary windfall, of course you're going to fall short.
Right.
The other part that I see right in front of me is that during the COVID emergency, when all kids were getting the vast majority of their education through the screen, parents were learning what was actually being taught and what wasn't being taught in the students. And some of them were thoroughly dissatisfied with that. And therefore, if they can do at home or homeschooling for 2.5 years, why can't we do it for the rest?
Yes.
Well, when you take students out of the school and put them in homeschooling, the funding in schools is determined by population. And so the funding goes down. We're going to have to work really hard to regain the trust and confidence of our parents if we want to bring them in.
Do you think that can be done?
Yeah, I think so. There's a lot of things that kids also missed when they were homeschooled, or when they were homeschooled during COVID.
Right.
Really important things. We've got a lot of high school students who never went to junior high. It was gone. And they never learned the personal discipline and how to sit still in class and how to turn in assignments on time that they should have learned in 6th and 7th and 8th grade.
Yes.
Okay. We've got a lot of young college students who never really went to most of their high school. And they never learned that they're personally responsible for their own education. It ain't the teacher's fault if you don't pass. And so we've got some catching up to do. And I think these things happen best, like watching a good film, in groups. Okay. But the group has to be sufficient and efficient to attract those people back in. Students can get the benefit of being there.
That seems like a potentially heavy lift.
Yeah. And your point?
Well, in part, I wonder if that is, how much of that falls on the school board and how much of that falls on administration?
you have a very good point. Yeah, it falls on the board. It falls on the administration. It falls on the teachers. Why not loud? It falls on the classified staff.
Yeah.
It falls on all of us. We need to make sure that the public education experience has sufficient value to convince folks to trust us. That's what we need to do.
Well, that is a much larger conversation than we have the scope for here. And one that I'll be honest, I'm not qualified to carry up half of. So let's hold off on that. We're actually coming close to the end of our time. This has been really interesting. I wish we could go a lot longer, but time calls. So let's wrap up with this. What is the best way for people to find out more about you, what you want to do in office, that kind of thing? Is it, you have a Facebook page or a website, or?
I'm working on my website. I'm not ready yet. Okay. But it's getting real close. So look the website up, and it will be Phil Snider 4, number 4, school board.
Okay.
Phil Snider for schoolboard.com.
We will put a link to that in the posting here. So
I appreciate it. You can email me at Philip Snider, PHILIP 1L, Snider, SNIDER, no spaces, 76 at Gmail.
Okay, great.
And if it's urgent, you can call me. I've got it right here, 385-498-1667.
Okay, great. That's your personal cell phone?
It rings to my personal cell phone. Yeah.
Very good. We were talking before the recording about when I ran for office, and I put my cell phone up on my website, and didn't get a lot of calls. Did get one rather lengthy call, so beware of that. But thank you so much for taking the time tonight. I really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you, Alan. Thank you so much for doing the project here. This is an important contribution to the democratic system.
Oh, thank you. All right. Well, we will talk again soon.
Good. Thanks, Alan.
You bet. And thank you for watching our interview with Stanwood-Camano School Board candidate Phil Snider. We invite you to subscribe to our newsletter, available in 4 local editions: Camano Island, North Whidbey, Central Whidbey, and South Whidbey. The newsletter arrives in your mailbox every Monday morning with news and events from your part of Island County. You can subscribe to our newsletter at voterinterests.com/subscribe. And look for more of these candidate interviews as the election season continues. Thank you and good night.